In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form.
The King James Bible is an intensely political work, and up until the 17th century, translating the Bible into English was a dangerous act, done in secret and punishable by death. Then in 1604, King James I of England authorised a new translation of the Bible with the intention to clarify religious differences, but also to solidify his power and supremacy. In so doing, he unintentionally democratized a book which for so long had been withheld from the masses. He ended up creating the People's Bible. The King James Version, or the KJV, is considered one of the most influential books the Western world has ever known. Its influence is partly the result of sheer volume, as more copies have been sold than any other book since its publication in 1611, between 5 and 7 billion. It contains a staggering 66 books, 1,189 chapters, and 800,000 words. Regardless of one's belief, the KJV is a book of great poetic power, and its words and rhythms are still on our tongues and in our writings. It has enriched the English language beyond measure, permeating everyday English and contemporary English idiom. It has inspired writers like John Milton, Herman Melville, J.R.R. Tolkien, Jane Austen, William Blake, Emily Dickinson, Henry Miller, Chinua Achebe, Seamus Heaney, and Toni Morrison. Even the world's most prominent atheist, Richard Dawkins, said a native speaker of English who has not read a word of the King James Bible is verging on the barbarian. As we shall see, its language would cross the ocean too, and seep into the rhetoric of its founding fathers, as well as Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, and others. We will also see how its influence has informed our common language, originating phrases which are so familiar to us we have forgotten that they came from a book that is over 400 years old. When King James I was crowned in 1603, the clergy, parliament and scholars were in marked disagreement over Bible translation. The clergy wished to maintain exclusive knowledge of the text in Latin, while scholars sought to open the Bible to the common reader, which was still considered heresy and punishable by death. What were they so afraid of? Perhaps the more radical elements of the Bible.
It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. Blessed are the peacemakers, because they will be called sons of God.
Of the 66 books in the King James Bible, 39 are in the Old Testament and 27 in the New Testament. Not only are there many books, but also many styles or genres of writing. These include apocalyptic, biography, epistles or letters, genealogies, history, inventories, laws, myth, parables, poetry, prophecy, proverbs, sermons, songs, and wisdom. The story told in the King James Bible is like a 5-act play. Act 1 is the story of creation. There are several different accounts of creation, with the most famous found in the first chapters of Genesis.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters.
This is a mythic telling of the creation story, not a scientific text. The story emphasizes the creativity of God, a world that reflects God's invisible qualities, humanity as creatures specifically made in the image of God, while also becoming creatures that come to experience separation from God. Act 2 is the story of Israel, a people chosen by God to be a blessing to the world by acting as a light to other nations. The descendants of Abraham have a God-given task to reveal God to the world, bringing all humanity back to God and bringing us together in a kingdom of love and peace.
Now the Lord had said unto Abraham, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing.
Stories of the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and their exile in Babylon are central to the events in Act 2, and these stories began life as oral histories. Many of the stories forming the Old Testament were collected together, revised and written down during the exile. One central theme is that God is experienced most deeply by the people of Israel in times of adversity. Act 3 is the story of Jesus Christ, as told in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. Jesus fulfills the original task of Israel to reveal God to the nations through his incarnation, crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension.
Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is God with us.
In this way, Jesus introduces the coming kingdom of God into the world, as Jesus is the fullest revelation of God in human form. Act 4 is the story of the early church, in which Jesus' disciples receive his Spirit and share the good news throughout the world.
Ye shall receive power, after that the Holy Ghost is come upon you, and ye shall be witnesses unto me, both in Jerusalem, and in all Judea, and in Samaria, and unto the utmost part of the earth.
This act is where the followers of Jesus enter the story, as they seek to follow in his footsteps and act as his body, the New Testament's image for the church. His followers create signs of his coming kingdom of love for others to see, join, and experience. The final act, Act 5, is about the future. Many of the prophecies found in the Bible look forward to a time when heaven and earth will be joined together and suffering and death eradicated, and we will experience being with God, ourselves, each other, and creation forever, an experience similar to that of the Garden of Eden, where we began.
And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new.
Bible translation in England already had a long history. The first translations in the vernacular had emerged some 600 years earlier, with Anglo-Saxon versions of the Gospels and the Psalms around 1300. In 1382, nearly 135 years before Martin Luther, and 60 years before the introduction of movable type to Europe, England's John Wycliffe oversaw the translation of the Bible from Latin. Considering they are handwritten texts, estimated to have taken 10 months of skilled labour to produce, a surprising number were created.
This Bible is for the government of the people, by the people, and for the people.
This project landed Wycliffe in court and led to laws making it a capital offence to translate or even read the Bible in the vernacular. Many of Wycliffe's followers were burned at the stake, and later, although he had already died of natural causes, his corpse was dug up, tried, and burned too. Then came the printing press, and with it the Gutenberg Bible. By 1517, the tide was turning, thanks to the Reformation in Germany led by Martin Luther. Luther's 95 Theses changed Europe, the state, and the church forever. One of his demands was that everyone should have the right to read the Bible in their own mother tongue, and he would be the major influence on the practice of Bible translation. This revolution in thinking was combined with increasing literacy and the invention of the printing press, which enabled books to be prepared, printed, and distributed more widely and more cheaply. Then along came William Tyndale. At a time when the Bible was still under the control of the established church and services were conducted in Latin, Tyndale was a radical man for the 16th century, who dared to challenge this. He advocated personal faith, the idea that a person could have a relationship with God without the established church, a dangerous idea. To achieve his goal, he worked on translating the Bible into English, making it accessible, as he said, to princes and ploughboys. This, however, was illegal in England, and so he fled to continental Europe.
The law and the gospel are two keys. The law is the key that shutteth up all men under condemnation, and the gospel is the key which opens the door and lets them out.
Tyndale should be considered the founding father of the King James Bible. He was a genius linguist who translated the original Greek, Hebrew, Syriac, and Latin and added to it the poetry of the Anglo-Saxon language. It is said that an unintended consequence of his writing style, beautiful prose, and vocabulary meant that Tyndale has had more influence on the English language than anyone, including William Shakespeare. In 1526, the publication of Tyndale's New Testament was made available in English for the first time and helped bring continental Reformation ideas to the people of England. For this, in 1536, he was burned at the stake as a heretic, and his followers were murdered. As the flames consumed him, his last words were, "Lord, open the King of England's eyes." By the time of Tyndale's death, Henry VIII had already become a Protestant, but refused to talk to Tyndale or pardon him. And yet, despite Tyndale's outlaw status and eventual execution, he left a lasting linguistic impact, because ironically, his illegal translation of the Bible became the keystone of the state-sanctioned version, the King James Bible. About 84% of the New Testament in the KJV is taken from Tyndale's translation, and 76% of the Old Testament.
Set me as a seal upon thine heart, as a seal upon thine arm. For love is as strong as death, jealousy is cruel as the grave. The coals thereof are coals of fire, which hath a most vehement flame.
Henry VIII had adopted Protestantism in the early 1530s. Yet by the time King James VI of Scotland became King James I of England 70 years later, there was still a conflict over religious texts, such as Wycliffe's and Tyndale's. James's predecessor on the throne, Queen Elizabeth I, had ordered the execution of his mother, Mary Queen of Scots, who was a Catholic threat to her Protestant reign. Then during James's reign, Protestant bishops had to contend with rebellious groups like the Puritans and Calvinists who questioned the king's absolute power. The problem was, there was more than one version of the Bible being read when James took the throne. Many people in England at the time were hearing the so-called Bishop's Bible when they went to church. But they were reading from the Geneva Bible at home, which had been created in that city by a group of Calvinist exiles during the bloody reign of Elizabeth's half-sister, Mary I. The biggest problem was the very popular Geneva Bible contained annotations questioning not only the bishop's power, but also the king's, going so far as to reference monarchs as tyrants 400 times.
So long the tyrants shall prevail as God hath appointed to punish his people, but he showeth that it is but for a time.
Something had to be done. In 1604, King James authorized a new translation of the Bible, intending to reinforce his image as a political and spiritual leader. James set out the process by which this new Bible was to be prepared, and then declared that it be the only version used in his realm.
And I took the little book out of the angel's hand, and ate it up, and it was in my mouth sweet as honey. And as soon as I had eaten it, my belly was bitter.
The translating was done by a committee of 54 scholars and clergymen over the course of many years. 6 groups of translators in 1604 set to work in Oxford, Cambridge and Westminster, 2 groups in each place. It was a long, laborious process. Each cleric came up with their own translation of the Bible, and then it would be discussed within their group. Once agreement was reached, the text was circulated to the other groups until a final version emerged. The first editions were large pulpit Bibles for use in churches, but within a year, smaller versions were printed for personal use. One notable aspect of the new translation was its defense of the monarchy.
The powers that be are ordained of God.
And its exclusion of the word tyrant. Misprints initially made some versions of the KJV notorious. These included the Wicked Bible, with the commandment, "Thou shalt commit adultery." And then there was the Murderer's Bible, which had, "Let the children be killed" instead of "filled." Many preferred the other existing translations, like the Geneva Bible, but King James' requirement that it be the sole Bible in the churches of his realm, i.e. the Authorized Bible, eventually bore fruit in a later recognition of the beauty of its prose.
Many waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it. If a man would give all the substance of his house for love, it would utterly be contemned.
Ironically, although the King James Bible was created to reinforce the divine right of kings, it became dynamite in the hands of Republicans, who later in 1642 rebelled against James's son, the despot King Charles I, leading to his execution, the abolition of the monarchy, and the establishment of the Commonwealth with Oliver Cromwell as Lord Protector. Cromwell used the language of the Bible to justify the execution of Charles I.
So ye shall not pollute the land wherein ye are, for blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it.
Biblical concepts drove arguments between royalists and parliamentarians, and increasing literacy meant such debates became part of everyday discourse. People could think for themselves. Democracy opened up, and it was the end of absolute monarchy. It would have the same democratizing effect across the ocean. The historian Melvin Bragg writes that, although it was the will of James I that made the book happen, it was the poetry of it, a civil war in the kingdoms of Britain, and a purposeful and valiant push west across the Atlantic to America that embedded it. The more revolutionary and republican readings of the KJV were taken to America, initially on the Mayflower in 1620, by Calvinist settlers escaping the compromises of religion in Stuart England for the Promised Land. And it is said that the Bible founded the English language over the Atlantic, and the KJV was their book. And so began its centuries of dominance as by far the biggest selling and widest read book in America. In 1789, when George Washington took his oath of office, he opened the book of Genesis to passages that included Joseph's dying reminder that God had promised the Israelites a new land.
And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing.
The prominence of the King James Bible in America was reinforced by the Methodist preacher George Whitefield, an enormously influential figure. He declared that based on the King James Bible, all men are equal, and liberty of conscience was the inalienable right of every natural creature. This period, known as the Great Awakening, also laid a foundation for the abolitionist movement, as revivals reached out to enslaved people and Methodists who regarded slavery as sinful. Both sides of the slavery debate used the Bible to argue their point, and it resulted in a battle for ownership of the truth of the Bible between North and South, leading to the Civil War and the eventual abolition of slavery. For the enslaved people, the KJV became not just the source for the teaching of liberation, but the source for spirituals. These became not just the voice of enslaved people, but later, through gospel, soul, jazz, and rock and roll, the voice of America. Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is widely acclaimed as one of the most poignant and eloquent political speeches, and it too echoes with biblical rhythms, phrases, and themes. The address contains no direct biblical quotes, but its cadences, phrases, and themes certainly reflect the text of the KJV. The cultural impact of the KJV has been immense. Its phrases and idioms have left their mark on the English language. The Bible was a public text heard throughout packed churches. As it became widely disseminated and the daily read for millions, its language was absorbed, both directly and through other writings. Alfred Tennyson considered Bible reading an education in itself. while Charles Dickens called the New Testament the very best book ever was or ever will be known in the world. Whether or not one believes the big story about our future as told in the King James Bible, the massive influence it has exerted on our current culture must surely be acknowledged. When William Tyndale was translating the Bible, he came across a Hebrew word that meant lovely to look at, and he couldn't find an English word that properly expressed its meaning. So he took the French word beau, which means someone who is handsome or pretty, and added the German ending full, and came up with a new word, beautiful. It was Tyndale's creative use of language that gave us so much of the beauty of the King James Bible. But it was King James himself who indirectly gave us a book of such great poetic power that it continues to enrich the English language today.
God save the King!
By commissioning a translation for the Bible with the aim of consolidating his power, he gave us the power to think for ourselves, to take control, and to adopt the language of the people. He gave us the people's Bible.
But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you.